I've got a TRS-300RR with rumbly main bearings.
We're going to fix that.
We're going to strip it down and investigate and find out what the problem is. The last few times we rode this bike, there was another noise, a rattling, irregular rattle. So while we've got it stripped down, we're going to investigate that, see if we can diagnose.
So, let's set up. I'm going to have to stop saying so.
We started by taking off all the plastics and the exhaust. And once we got all the plastics off, we set about taking off the engine ancillaries, starting with carburetor, while Connor dropped the water out and took off the water pump cover.
Removed.
Just the longest bolt in the world.
To get the exhaust off, you have to take out the top shock mount bolt. I then undid the bolt for the top engine mount.
Need some play off. Need some play off anyway.
And then Connor started to take off the sump plate so we could get ready to drop the oil.
I'm not surprised at all.
Once we've got everything off at the top of the bike, it's time then to put the bolt back in for the suspension and drop the bike back onto its wheels. Then we can start to work to take off the sump plate and work on the underside of the bike. For everything we're taking out, we're putting the bolts back in the original holes, and that way when we rebuild we don't have to go looking for bolts. So with the sump plate off, we drained all the oil out. Then Connor started to take out all the bolts for the engine, including the swing arm spindle. The front engine mount was really tight. While we're working on the bottom end of the engine, take the gear lever off.
Sweet, bottom one's out, front one's ready for pulling out.
Yep.
Have a quick check round.
Top one's out. We're going to try and save ourselves a job because we'd rather not bleed the clutch if we don't have to, so we're just going to take the cover off and zip tie it up somewhere. Is that ever going to stop?
The clutch is operated hydraulically, and there's a top hat and a bearing that sits inside the clutch cover. If you disconnect all that, it needs bleeding when you refit it. So what we did, we just took off the clutch cover and zip tied it up to the handlebars, just to save that job on the rebuild. Make sure you don't drop the bearing into the oil.
Last night, just before we were taking engine out or just getting the last couple of bolts out, the camera failed on us. The battery went flat, which I'd just taken off the charger. It shouldn't have done that, which really pissed me off. But we got the engine out and on the bench. But at that, it was quite late at night when that happened. So we decided just to leave it for the night, charge everything up and come back the next day. And here we are. But let's get it on the bench. Right, so let's get this stripped down. If anybody wants a nice sign like this, get in touch with us, and we'll leave a link in the description to my son's business, which is called Luxecut. So let's get everything slackened off. Stop saying so at the beginning of every sentence.
So,
Cylinder head's held on by 6 8mm screws.
Firstly, we're going to examine the head. Check all the bolts out. These all need replacing, these copper bushers. We'll save them anyway.
Gently tap off the cylinder head just with a rubber or a leather hammer.
Put the seal on the top. Barrel off.
The barrel's held on with 4 10mm bolts, but the back two are quite awkward to get to because of the overhangs on the back of the barrel. So you're alright with a wobbly headed socket or a spanner.
You can still see the hatchings. Look. Hardly very little scoring in that. That's in quite nice condition. Which is nice. Right, next.
Then it's time for the gudgeon pin, which is held in by 2 circlips on either side. They're actually called C-clips, but you get these out with a pair of needle nose pliers and just squeeze them in gently, just enough so that they'll free. Don't squeeze them in too much, so you want to use these again. If not, you'll have to buy a new one. You will sprain them if you squeeze them too hard.
Oh no.
Then gently knock out the gudgeon pin with a punch.
Not very much wear on that at all. And that is a testament to its owner, which is me. And that's what happens when you keep your air filter nice and clean. Alright, it's not perfect. There's still a couple of little score marks, but this is a, what is it now? It's a 6-year-old bag, and this is the original piston. We've never changed it. So I'm saying that's good. What I want to do is I want to test the rings and see how much wear is on the rings. And I do that by throwing them inside the bore. So let's get them off. It's got me glue. One off, and that was the top ring. Yep. I don't know why I'm whispering. I sound like a snooker referee. Alright, that's that out. Let's give them a little clean.
Sir Steve Saunders told me that the piston ring gap was 0.6 to 0.65 millimeters, which was bang on spec.
Hardly any wear on those piston rings at all. Which again is a testament to its rider and owner. The regular maintenance, cleaning out your air filter. That's what happens. You get a 6-year-old bike on its original piston and rings. Not wanting to blow my own trumpet or anything, but I'm awesome.
Just turn the piston upside down, drop it into the bore, and you should see very, very little wear. If you've got very little wear on your piston, obviously you'll get quite a lot of movement if you've got wear on your piston.
There's hardly anything in that at all. Not bad. That is a very tight piston. So I'm happy to put that piston back. Alright, so let's get the clutch pack out then. That's 10mm. That's the clutch pack. It's all in one piece. You take this ring of bolts out, and then all the plates inside. They should be, I think it's roughly 10mm thick. So we'll test that when we rebuild it. We'll take that gear out and we'll put that in the same box because we're going to be in the same vicinity. Oh, yeah.
Just ride one time for your mind.
So with the clutch out, we took out the kickstart idler gear and then started to knock off the inner clutch cover.
Something else is holding that. Oh no, it's not. There you go.
You know what that little click was, weren't you?
Kickstart.
Kickstart.
Yeah, the kickstart spring pins back off. It's such a pain in the arse to get back in straight as well.
Time for the primary drive bolt. And this one can be a bit of a pain if you don't have a rattle gun, but if you've got a rattle gun, it'll come straight out. If not, you have to lock up the crank, otherwise it'll just keep turning. It's important for me to add that I'm not a professional at this. I don't do this for a living, and there are a lot of people who know a hell of a lot more about this than I do. So if you see me doing anything wrong, leave us a comment. The stator cover can be a bit of a pain to get off sometimes. With just a bit of a knot with a soft hammer, it should come off nice. The nut for the flywheel is 27mm, but then you're going to need a special tool, a puller. You can buy these for about 25 quid on eBay or your local trials bike stockists. So you back off the puller bolt, you screw on the puller to the actual flywheel, and you screw back in the bolt, which just pops off the flywheel. That just pulls it off the taper. If not, you're going to be struggling to get that off. Don't ever try and bar off your flywheel.
I don't know if you can hear this noise or not, but this is the reason why we're stripping it down. That rough rumbling noise, that should not be happening. Right, it's time to start taking the screws out.
It's time to get out the crankcase screws. Now I know what everybody's going to be saying, that you shouldn't be using an impact gun on screws this small, but it's down to preference. I've always done this, I've never found a problem with it, they never really round off. So, like I say, it's down to everybody. Some people will say it's alright, and some people won't. Let us know what you think of that in the comments. Casing screw that's as slippery as a greased eel is hiding in there somewhere, and it's behind that drain plug. And if you don't know about it, you can be smashing away on your crank and wondering why the cases aren't separating. This little screw is why. So take off that drain plug, little screw behind it, undo that one. Sneaky TRS. Once you're absolutely positive you got all the screws out, take a soft hammer, hold the crankcase on the side closest to the one that you're hammering, and then hit the crank with the soft hammer. Do not use a tough hammer, it's got to be a soft one, otherwise you will damage your crank. And if you haven't got a new one, in my case I do have a new one, but if you don't have a new one you will damage that crank and you will have to buy a new one. If the crankcase is a little bit stubborn, it might help just to warm it up a little bit. So just a heat gun to start warming up the aluminium, everything will expand, things will start to move, and you'll find your crank just fly out in no time.
There we go. Just drop it on its back. And this is the part where you can lose gears if you're not careful. And there you go. And that's open. Little washer there. Make sure that goes back when we've done. And this is the problem. This is why I've stripped it down. That should not be making that noise. That's coming out on camera. That's why it needs replacing. So now to just get out, yeah, so it's not just one bearing either that's gone, they've both gone. And this is the third time this has happened. And it's strange because on this model, on the previous model, it was fed from the gearbox. So it had a little pump in there that fed the main bearings through the gearbox. But this one has got a little gallery. And what happens is your premix fuel drops into there. There's enough oil in the premix fuel to just lubricate these bearings. But it doesn't seem like these have been getting that oil. And this is the third set of main bearings on a bike that's not done that many hours. I've not ridden this bike as much as I should have done because of this reason. It just keeps breaking. Alright, so let's lift out the gearbox.
Once the cases are open, to get your gearboxes out, what you need to do is first take out the selectors. So you pull out the two shafts for the selectors and then take the selectors out.
And go back in that way. Ooh, look at the wear on those. And they've been replaced before. The last time I stripped this, they were replaced.
Then your two gearbox shafts will be free to take out, but take a lot of care, because if you do drop any of these gears, it will be a real ball ache to get them put back together. So gearboxes are so complicated, it's always best to use belt and braces. So what I like to do is zip tie the gearbox shafts together and then keep them in a sealed box so they just can't come apart, and then you've not got a problem. You just put them straight back in as you took them out, no problem.
There you go. Normally I wouldn't do this, but we're putting a new crank in it anyway, so we might as well just use a steel drift and a proper hammer and knock it out. There you go.
Hey, easy.
Yep, certainly did. Ooh, what's that?
It looks like a bit of gasket.
It's part of gasket, yeah. Like I say, normally we wouldn't be doing that. We would use a brass drift. That's actually a copper drift, but it's way too thick, so it wouldn't have actually knocked it in without putting damage on bearing surface. I was about to go up to pick one up, a brass drift that's really narrow from my dad's, but then I realised we're just replacing crank, so it doesn't matter if that gets damaged. As it happens, it weren't damaged anyway. It only took two hits and it fell out. So let's have a look at these bearings. Oh, that one won't even turn. I think that's probably because the seal has been pushed up against it. And now what we need to do is we need to get this in the press and press out them bearings.
So to get the seal out, just force in a screwdriver between the seal and the bearing, give it a little twist, and it should just pop right out.
So rough. And if you actually look down, let's see if we can get it on the camera. If you look down that gallery, you can see daylight. Can you see it, Connor?
No. Oh, yeah. Yeah.
And that means that that gallery is doing its job. Right, so next job is to press these bearings out, and then we can clean everything up, get everything ordered, and start to reassemble. And make sure this is bang flat, otherwise you're going to damage casing.
If you're a hobbyist mechanic, this might look quite terrifying to you. But if you just have a bit of confidence, these jobs aren't as hard as you actually think they are.
This is a little, this is a flywheel side, little seal.
Now it's all in bits and we've got the main bearings out, I can investigate what the problem is, why these main bearings keep going. Because a bike from 2018 should not have had 3 sets of main bearings, especially not if the piston is still looking like brand new. So there is a problem, there's got to be some kind of a problem. Now, say if you don't know what our 2-stroke works, if you look there on top, sorry about that light, there's a gallery just there. And that gallery lets oil and fuel mixture through there, and that then sits to the back of the bearing and it leaks out through the open case bearing back into the crankcase, and then obviously after a little while that extra oil burns off through exhaust, and it's the same on both sides. Yeah, absolutely all clear. Now what my worry is that on the back side of the bearing there it's all scorched. Now whether that's saying it's getting too hot and that's possibly why it's crystallising all the oil, or burning the oil, carbonising it, and then that's getting onto the ball racers and that's what's wearing the bearings or making them sound that way. I don't know. But when I spoke to Steve Saunders about it, who's obviously you'll probably know, he's the dealer and he imports the bikes and the spares, he said that there was an updated bearing, a superseded bearing that was completely enclosed. Now, I understand what he's saying and I appreciate what he's saying, but that would render these 2 ports, galleries, completely useless. So I don't know what to think about that. What do you guys think? I don't know. I'm not an expert on this. All I can do is order the bearings from Steve Saunders, and if it goes wrong, complain back to him. Because normally I will go to my bearing stockist and I'll pick a set of these up, just the same ones, and I'll ask for really good bearings, NSK, NMB, something like that, FAGs. But in this case, I'm definitely not going to do that. I'm going to order all the seals, all the bearings from Saunders. If it goes wrong, I can go back to him and say, what's going on? Also, got 2 cranks. That's the old crank. You can see a bit of damage there on the woodruff key, and there's the new one. Now this crank's not brand new. This is out of a bike, I think it was about 3 or 4 months old, but it got a problem from the factory. So under warranty, TRS, or Saunders I would think, sent out a new crank to him. He replaced the crank, but it didn't cure the problem. So we know this is a good crank. What caused that damage was, what I think happened is the nut came loose a little bit, and then the flywheel came off of its taper and just sheared the woodruff key, and then all the bits of the woodruff key got in between the flywheel and the crank and just chewed it all up. So that's why that needs replacing. That's why it's really important to have this nut nice and tight, which it will be in future, and I'm going to have it Loctited as well. And for if anybody wants to know just how a 2-stroke engine works, I might as well just explain it. Some people don't know, so I'll explain it. So your carburetor's here, and this feeds your fuel and air mixture in through this area. Now your piston is going up and down inside there. And when your piston goes up, it creates a vacuum, negative pressure in here, which pulls in the fuel into the bottom. Alright. Meanwhile, your piston has gone all the way up to the top and it's firing the previous cycle's fuel. So that makes the piston come shooting back down. Now what happens then is your piston puts a positive pressure inside this chamber, which then forces the fuel and air mixture up through that hole there, another one there, and out through those 2 little vents in the side there. They call them ports. So they're transfer ports. And that in turn forces out the exhaust from the firing cycle and replaces it with fuel, which is why it's not as efficient as a 4-stroke engine, because you've still got a bit of exhaust in there while you've got your fuel air mixture in the top end, and then the cycle starts all over again. So we wet everything down with WD-40 and started to clean up all the casings. I like to use fine Scotch-Brite pads to clean up the aluminium casings. It gets off the dirt, it gets off the oil, but it doesn't damage the aluminium casings. It's important to clean the top of the piston, if it just for one reason, so you can uncover the arrow, which is always meant to be pointing forward. If not, you'll not know the direction of the piston and you might put it in backwards. Might you? Now it's good to prepare for this next part. Drop your crank and your bearings into the freezer. Just give them about an hour. Then get your heat gun and warm up your casings. They don't have to be red hot, just get them nice and warm. Then take your bearings out of the freezer and just offer them up. Sometimes they'll just drop all the way in. That's called thermal expansion and contraction.
Ingenuity, that is. I just want to warm my casing up just nicely.
If they don't just drop straight in, a little bit of oil and the press persuades them. Then it's time to put gearbox back in. Snip your tie wraps, offer it up and make sure they don't separate. Drop your selectors back in on your primary and secondary shaft. Make sure the pegs on the selectors are right inside the channels on the selector barrel.
Full stop. One of the dowels has dropped out. Locating dowels. It's dropped out of that side, or that side, or that side. But it's definitely fallen out. Now, I can't put it back together without this dowel, because the dowel is actually the locator. It's what gives it the machine fit location. So without the dowel, the casings could be offset. Pull the bench out, see if it's fallen down back, because other than over at the press, these haven't been off the bench, so it shouldn't be far away. I just hope I can find it, because if not, it's full stop for this project until I can get a new one. Crisis over. I found it.
With the crank being in the freezer, it makes it just that tiny little bit smaller. It shrinks in size. So if you warm your bearing grows in size a tiny bit. It just makes everything mate together easier. It's called a sweat fit.
That's where the flywheel sits. And that's that part. So, drop that in, see if it'll go all the way through. Nice. All the way up. Let that sit there for a bit, because the crank's still cold. So, just give this a quick minute. At this point, it's easy to forget the gasket. And I'll try not to forget the gasket this time. Not that I've done it in the past. The centre gasket has got a little part that you have to cut out afterwards. Yeah. So that fits. Like that. Yeah, that part you cut out. So drop it on the dowel.
Use your soft hammer to knock down the casings until they mate together, and then put your screws in. Then you really need to be checking your gearbox and make sure it turns. Make sure your crank's centralised by just measuring the gap between the side of the webs and the crankcases. If the gaps aren't equal, use your soft hammer to centralise them. Use your old seal and a socket the same size as the outer dimension of the seal to knock in the new seal.
Which is still rolling. Done. The noise is gone. Right, not gonna lie, I made a bit of a mistake here. When I rebuilt the gearbox, when I tightened all the bolts up, the gearbox wouldn't turn. And the reason for that was that I'd got the washer on the wrong side. Now, I'm sure I took the washer out. If I had to look back on the video, the washer was on this side when I took it off. It was sticking to the inside of this cover. But when I put it back together this time, it wouldn't turn. So we stripped it apart, put it back together, and now it turns nice and free and it goes through all the gears. So, hold my hand up, I made a mistake. But I don't do this for a living. This is not what I do for a living. The only reason I'm doing this is just to show people that you can do these things at home, just with minimal tools. You don't need to be an expert at it. But while I've got it stripped down, what I am going to do is replace all these bolts. because I got some stainless ones for just a few quid. I'm going to replace some nice stainless bolts. And this doesn't put a lot of torque on things. It's a brilliant little tool. Fantastic for rebuilding things like this that are quite delicate. A bit faster.
Oil up the spacer that the main seal runs on and pop it in. Then fit your primary drive gear. Then a bit of oil on the small end bearing. Slide that into position. And knock in your gudgeon pin. And fit your C-clips. Lots more oil in the channels that your piston rings will fit in. Then fit your piston rings, making sure they're all lined up with the pegs on the back. Next is your base gasket. Lubrication is really important now, so oil up your piston and oil up your barrel as well. This barrel's got really good access to the piston rings as you're fitting it over the piston, so you can actually reach in and nip your piston rings closed, and just with a little twist action as you put the barrel on, the piston rings will fit into position. And tap it down and your barrel's on. Rotate your engine a couple of times just to make sure. Then torque down your barrel bolts. Click, click. Always replace your O-rings in your cylinder head, because that's the only thing separating the combustion chamber from the water jacket. Give it all a clean up. The top hose water inlet faces forward and to the left a little bit. Tiny little dab of grease on your finger just to rub on the seals, and that helps them to stick in position as you drop in the head onto the barrel. Again, always replace the copper washers for the bolts that hold the cylinder head on. Next is the reeds and the rubber inlet manifold. It's always best to fit the kickstart spring when you've got the engine out, because you can fit the casing at 180 degrees and then turn the spring all the way around. Once it's in the actual frame, it makes it 10 times harder, trust me. Then it's the idler gear. There's one washer that fits behind it and one that fits in front of it, and then the circlip on top. Not going to go into too much detail on this video because it's going to be long enough, but the clutch pack, when you've stripped it all down, the actual thickness of the pack should be 10mm. Attach your kickstart and just roll the engine over a few times just to make sure everything's free and you've got plenty of compression. Then fit the water pump screws. While I've got biking bits, I thought while I can access the parts that normally get dirty and you can't actually clean, I thought I'd just TFR them, just give it a quick jet wash down.
If anybody went seen the previous videos, well, if you haven't seen previous videos, what are you doing? Hit subscribe right now and come back when you've done that. These bolts for the sump plate, they kept stripping out before, so we helicoiled them. Now, I really wanted to time cert them, but we only had helicoils at the time, so we just used what we'd got just to get it back up and riding again. But now, I've actually got some time certs, and here they are, some time certs. Now, the difference between helicoils and time certs are, they've got a little shoulder on them. If you can see the shoulder, but that means you can tighten them right up, and they hit the surface and stop. The problem is with these, when you tighten the screw up, there's nothing behind them, so the helicoils just fall inside the frame, or they just wind out. So this is a major modification. The first thing I'm going to do is get these helicoils out, so I can start putting the time certs in. You can get the old helicoils out using the actual tool for putting them in. In the old video, someone said to me, why didn't you Loctite them in? You should have used red Loctite for the actual time certs. This is why. Because I didn't want to get them stuck in there. And I think that's exactly what's happened. I think it's stuck in anyway. It snaps it out. So that's not end up well, but it just makes it a little bit harder. Because now I've got to pick the helicoils out. The bottom one, I managed to get, I think. That one will come out. There it goes. Just get an edge on that, pick it out, and just pull the whole thing out in one go. Brilliant. The whole thing's coming out, it's just unscrewing. Alright, helicoils out, time certs in. But first, I want to make a nice clean surface so that the Loctite gives it a good bite. Brilliant. So you can actually buy a tool for fitting time certs. I suffer with an affliction which is called being from Yorkshire. So we don't buy those tools if we don't need them. What I do is I'll get a nut and bolt and put the nut on the bolt. In this case it's a nylock one, it doesn't have to be a nylock one. And then you take the time cert with the shoulder up and screw that part on first. Screw it in there. Get as much thread on as you can. And then you tighten up the nut onto the time cert. And take some extra Bondi, if that's even a word, some extra tough Loctite. Make sure you put that somewhere where you can spill it, because that's one of my favourite things to do. So I'll put a little bit in there as well. And then screw it in. Give it a real good tighten up, because this doesn't want to ever come out. And then you undo the nut. And take out your screw, take out your bolt, and your time cert's right in there. And it's absolutely perfect, exactly what it should be. And then you should, fingers crossed, have got some threads in your frame that will never have to be maintained again. Let's just see if these threads are good, because they don't look the best. Nope, they are not. We have a problem. So the threads in the bottom one, they look like they've completely gone. They have. So that is an issue. I believe that is something that I can't do in this workshop unless I go with a higher sized time cert. So let us know what you'd do with that. I definitely can't put the bolt back in it. So I need a bigger time cert then. So obviously that's a repair for another day. It's nothing we can actually do today. I think if I get a larger size time cert with a bigger outer diameter and the same inner diameter, I could probably drill that out and put the next size one in. But like I said, that's nothing we can do today, and it'll just hold the job up. And I want to get back out and riding this, because it's not been ridden in quite a while now. So let's get engine back in and get it working again. So before I start bolting the flywheel and things, and making it all heavier, I thought I might as well just try and iron the engine, do it while bike's laid down. I've not actually done this before, so this might be harder and it might be easier, I'm not sure. But let's find out, I'm always up for new things. Plus with the swing arm, you have to put the swing arm bolt in as well. So it might help it being on its side. Let's find out. That was just the easiest. I've not actually put any bolts in yet. In future, I will always do that. I've not put any bolts in yet, but it was just sitting there in perfect position as well. Just want that top bolt in, the side frame pieces, bolt those in, and Bob's your uncle. Easiest engine fitment I've ever done. Before you tighten up any of the bolts, make sure everything's in, just loosely. By hand. Right, so let's loosely fit the two frame pieces.
Once the main swing arm bolts in, it's easy just to stand the bike up.
Since that's the last one I've put in, that's the first one I'll tighten. May as well. So we've got the front bolt tightened up, we've got the bottom one tightened up, we've got the swing arm tightened up, we've got the top bolt tightened up. So engine secure. We just got these to nip up now. Not going to bore you with all this, you pretty much get the idea.
Give all the drain plugs a nip, make sure they're tight.
Make sure you clean off your drain plugs because they're all magnetic. If you've got any issues then inside your gearbox, that'll show up. And it's a good opportunity to go around and torque up all your bolts again. I think these are 16 Newton meters, I could be wrong. Put in comments if I've got that wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's alright.
Now drop in your Woodruff key, offer up the flywheel, just give it a little wiggle from side to side to make sure you centralise your Woodruff key. Then I, personally, am Loctiting it. I've had a problem with this before.
I'm not going to show you how much torque I'm going to put on this for anybody who's actually squeamish. This nut is only made of aluminium, so I really shouldn't put this much torque on, but I'm just letting you guys know. I'm censoring it. The next scene may include me crying. That was quite scary, but that is really on there.
Sump plate's a bit of a spring fit, so always loosely put your bolts in first and then go around and tighten everything up. In our case, obviously, we've only got 3. What would you like? Would you like us to make another video to show the repair of the frame? Leave us a comment. Cab was looking a bit grotty, so we thought we'd take the opportunity while it were off just to give it a quick sonic clean. can't fit the exhaust with the shocker bolted in, so push that out of the way and that gives you access to feed the exhaust through. The bottom exhaust bolt passes through the frame, through the top of the master cylinder and through the grommet on the bottom of the exhaust, and then you've got a funny shaped nut on the back that fits into the grommet. Then on top, the shocker bolt goes all the way through the frame, through the shocker, through a spacer, through your exhaust mount, and then is bolted on at the end with a nut. Now it's time for the front pipe, and the end is in sight at this point. Putting in the gearbox oil can be a bit of a pain if you don't have a really tiny funnel, so here's my solution.
For the gearbox oil, I like to use light gear oil for mine. The clutch just feels nicer. But you put in 350ml into gearbox. Now, how I do it is I measure out 250 here, pour that back into an empty can, because these spout things are good for distributing it, but they're not very good for measuring it. If I just put another 100ml in now from this full bottle, that's it. Pour that back into this one. We know we've got 350ml in there. And then dump all that gearbox. It's just about the perfect size for putting it in. Just don't squeeze it, just let it do its own thing.
Then just nip up the filler plug and refit the breather.
I know the chain's a bit grotty, but there's still a bit of life left in it. If there are any nice trials bike shops out there that want to donate a new chain sprockets to me, you know how to find me.
Finish that job off with a splash of chain lube. While I'm fitting the fuel tank, I thought it might be a nice time to say I transport motorbikes for a living, so if anybody wants national motorbike transport, any kind of bike, anywhere in the mainland UK, get a no obligation quote on the website. We'll leave you a link in the description. Wazzing all the mudguard and air filter bolts. And don't forget to tighten up the Jubilee clips for the carb. And that's it, everything back together. There's just one last job. Whoever designed the radiator fill was a sadist, but if you use a bladder out of a hydration pack from a mountain bike, it absolutely works a treat. Bleed the coolant through by undoing the bolt on the top of the cylinder head. So, did I do the job properly, or is it just going to explode? Sweet as a nut. No more howling, rumbling main bearings. So, other than the obligatory noise when you let the clutch out, it sounds like a pretty healthy engine. The fan cuts in, make sure it runs up and down, goes through all the gears, and that's it, job done. So if you did enjoy that video, you want to see more videos like this, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and I'll hopefully see you on the next one.